Hey guys, welcome to my channel where we discuss anything and everything to do with mental health and psychology. In this video, unfortunately or fortunately, we'll be going through the last video on the KSA. And you guys are probably as sick of it as I am. So let's get straight into it. We're going to just be talking about general tips for the whole KSA. So we're not going to be talking about specific criteria. We're just going to be talking about how to get started and my general tips for the whole thing. Tip 1 is to actually use the checklist that they provide as a starting point. So what I would do is look at the checklist and it tells you exactly what you need and what evidence you need to provide. And what I would do, which is tip 2, is start from the bottom and work my way up. So if you look at that checklist, what you'll find is actually the last few KSAs require more for you to do than the other ones. The reason that I would start from the bottom and work my way up is the last few require you to get references. And I don't know if you've got references before, but it takes a long time because everyone's got busy lives and sometimes it falls to the bottom of their to-do list, even though it's a priority to you. So it might require you chasing people, following up, and just a lot more of chasing people. That's what most of the time is going to be. So I would start with those and get my references, contact them as early as possible when doing the KSA. Because the other ones, for example, like the self-statements, they just rely on you to get the statement done rather than waiting for other people to do things for you. My third point is that there's no right or wrong answer. And I literally hate when people say this because I am a perfectionist and I want a right answer and I want a clear cut, okay, this is what you do and this is how you get the points. But because it's based on your journey, your career and your own personal experiences, it's so individual because everyone's path within psychology and within their psychology career is so individual, so unique to them that no one has exactly the same experiences, they're exactly the same training or the same opportunities. So it's an individual journey. But I think that's what also makes it, when you have that blank page, you can't go wrong. If it feels right to you, it feels like, for you, it feels like it meets that requirement, it probably does, and put it in. Because it's based on your journey, your experiences, it's personal, unique, and it's just a reflection of you and your experiences. Does that make sense? And I know there might be some doubt or some resistance to starting, but I think if you have time, watch my videos and what you'll actually learn is that it's an open space to talk about that topic that it's about. Does that make sense? What they want to know is your views, your experiences, and your ability to reflect on those experiences. And essentially it's about working through those self-doubts and knowing that your experiences are good enough and working through some of those imposter syndrome and some of those thoughts that you can't do it or you're not good enough to do it. Because essentially you are, especially if you've gotten to this stage, you are. And I think when you have that level of confidence in your ability, it comes through in your reflections. Because when you doubt yourself, you're almost play a little bit too safe and you don't say things because you fear how people might react. So you don't, maybe, for example, you might not give your true opinion or be as critical as you want to be or be as reflective as you want to be because you're like, oh, I don't really want them to know that, let's say, for example, I have imposter syndrome or I doubt myself, because then they might think that those doubts are true, or I don't want to tell them I have perfectionism and struggle in that way because you might fear what they might think, but actually that shows that you're a human, which everyone is, and actually shows that you have that level of reflection. Because if you think about people who, let's say, don't have any weaknesses or don't have struggles, it's most likely that they're not being honest, because everyone has struggles, everyone has weaknesses, and everyone has things that they struggle with. because it's a part of understanding yourself, being reflective. And even before, let's say, before you start this process, actually go through, there's a book that I recommended before, but it's a self-reflection, self-practice, and I think, or self-practice, self-reflection, and I'll link the book in the description, and I've done it in another video before, but actually go through that process, and I highly recommend it because I went through that process before I did my KSA, and I think it helped my reflections a lot, because they became a little bit more deeper, because I got to know parts of myself that I knew were there, but maybe I was in a way actively hiding from. Also, like I spoke about with references, I would also ask universities for module descriptors, module guides, anything that would evidence your modules, just to jog your memory on what you've gone through, because especially sometimes it's been so long since you've been to university or did your undergraduate, did your postgraduate, whatever the courses that you've done, that it's hard to remember. So what I did was I asked the lecturer that I was still in contact with for that information, because normally universities store modules, but they only store them for a certain amount of time. So there's no harm in just asking if they still have them. Ask for transcripts if you don't have them already. Any materials that I don't think they would have lecture slides or presentations. That is very unlikely that they've kept those, especially if it's been a few years since you've gone to university and you don't really need them. Module descriptors are enough, and that I use module descriptors, and sometimes transcripts are enough depending on what you're talking about, because the transcript is enough in terms of describing what the module is. The specific content you can just talk about generically. I don't think you generally need to put the module descriptors in there. I did for some of mine, the ones I had access to, but some, it's been so long since I've done my undergraduate that there was no way I was going to find them, so I just left those out. But just see what you can get hold of for your evidence. And that's the same with jobs. Normally with jobs, they store your information if you've been an employee there, even if it's been a few years. So what I would do is email their HR department and request that transcript information. And the good thing about getting those done first is that they're out of the way. And all you can do them while you're doing your self-statements, they can be happening in the background of, and then they can just send it to you as and when they have it. So at the end, then you're just not waiting around for those. So starting that actual essay, you can start in two ways, and it depends how best you work. So when you start it, you can either start it in two ways. You can either go through all of them and write a generic outline, because some people find that more useful, because it's almost like you know what you're expecting in the next one and in the next one, and it just seems like a more of a structured process. Or what you could do is focus on one at a time. So you can either do, okay, I'm going to do a knowledge, skills, and then attitudes, or what you can do is focus on literally one KSA at a time and make a schedule that way. Either way, I think first just start off, either whether you do it, go through all of them and make an outline or a plan of what to write, or you do it one at a time. So you do the plan and then you write it out like an essay, or you write them all as an outline and then go back and then write them as essays. I did the going through it one at a time, but obviously it's the way you work and your personal preference with either approach. And what I did was I started with outlining what I would write. You can do this as bullet points, as a with a heading and then bullet points underneath and then heading for each paragraph. Or what you could do is a mind map. I prefer doing a mind map just because it helped me plan out my ideas before like making a structure, if that makes sense. And what I also did with that is also think of the examples that I would use. So what examples, because sometimes it can be hard to look back into your memory just on the spot. So what I would do is, okay, if I can't think of an example, move on. And then over time, you kind of just think of them and remember examples that you might not have remembered at the beginning. And what I did while doing the mind maps was actually jot down examples for more than the 2 illustrative examples, because throughout mine I just put in examples just to illustrate the point, as well as doing the 2 illustrative examples in the ones that require illustrative examples, which are more detailed, so the details could be harder to remember. So it might be useful to do that, an outline, and then come back to it when you're writing it, and you might it might jog more memories. Also keep in mind that the essay is reflective and not just descriptive. So you can describe your experiences, describe definitions, but also being reflective on your experiences, being reflective and critical of theories and ideas or concepts that you do present within your essays. So it just shows that you have more of a critical stance, and critical in terms of weighing up the pros and cons of something, rather than just being completely negative or completely positive about something. And next, keep coming back and applying it to the CBT role, and apply it into how this will benefit your practice if you are on the training, or when you're on the course, or when you've completed the course, if that makes sense. Also, when you're doing this, use the checklist, and also use the BABCP, because they're the best on guidance of the KSA, because they're the ones that are going to be accepting it or marking it, unless your course is doing that, but then they're guided by the BABCP too. So use the BABCP guide, use the BABCP website as for guidance, for information, for any changes to the BABCP guidelines, because I know since I've started this series there have been changes on who needs to provide a full KSA and who can just provide a partial KSA. So just look on the website for any changes or updates that they might have. It's also important to know that there is actually no time limit on evidence. So evidence doesn't really expire. So even if you've had evidence from a few years ago to recent evidence, it doesn't really have a time limit and you can still use it. So you don't need to get updated evidence, because you've already, by having that experience, going on that training, or whatever the evidence might be, by having already experienced that, you already got the knowledge, skills, or the attitude. Does that make sense? So even if the evidence is from a few years ago, still use it, still add it to your portfolio of evidence. If you want to use more recent evidence, you can do that, but it's not really a requirement. And lastly, you can use my videos for ideas on what to write, because it's always so difficult to start with a blank page, and it's so difficult to just know what to write. Because I know when I was doing my KSA, that was actually the hardest bit, because I had nothing on the blank piece of paper, and for weeks I spent just looking at the blank piece of paper, closing my laptop, coming back to it a few weeks later, and then it was literally probably like a year of that until I actually started my KSA, literally because the deadline was approaching. So yeah, just use my videos as a guide. But again, everything that I talk about in my videos, you don't have to write, it's just an idea. So if you think of something that I haven't said, or something I've said doesn't apply to you, just leave it out, because the things that I say are ideas and not things that you necessarily have to write. Or if I didn't say them, it's not that that idea is wrong, it's just that I haven't come up with it. So if you have an idea that I haven't said, just put it in if it demonstrates your experience within that criteria. Also, don't use my videos as outlines for your essays, because they're not intended for that. They're just intended to give you that flow of ideas when you don't necessarily know what to write, or just need that bit of reassurance that the path that you're on is the right one. So that's it for the video, guys. Hopefully you found the content of this video useful and it helps you in writing your KSA. And this is the final video on the KSA. Finally, we're done. And if you have any other comments, questions or concerns, please leave it down in the comments and I'll reply to you as soon as possible. And yeah, so don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall see you guys in the next video.